What's good, Knick fans? How we doing?
So
What's up? We got Zach on today for the pregame. How you doing, Zach?
good, good. Got
It's
a lot
good
to
to
talk
hear.
about with the trade rumors, and we got a little pregame.
You know it. Okay, so I figure it's only fair to start off talking pregame because that is what this is about, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So let's get a little bit into the Knicks versus Jazz. The Knicks play the Jazz tonight. The Red Hot Jazz, as a matter of fact. They're 12-4. Although two of their losses did come at home, so obviously this season they haven't been a phenomenal home team. Obviously, the matchup predictor doesn't have the Knicks winning. We don't really win a lot of the games in the matchup predictor. But that doesn't really mean anything because this Knicks team is really hot or cold. You never know. But getting into the individual matchups tonight, Zach, would you like to start off with the point guard matchup of Peyton versus Conley?
Yeah. Conley's. I don't know how hot Conley's been. I haven't watched Jazz games, but we know Payne's been hot and cold. I feel like most guys are hot and cold, but yeah, I don't really have much on Mike. Do you know how good Mike Conley been? I haven't been
Um,
watching Jazz games.
I know. Surprisingly enough, last season he's doing just a lot better than last season. I know last season wasn't great for him.
Hmm.
And you don't usually see players regress just to come back and have a stronger season. That doesn't usually happen. So I will say that it's quite the interesting kind of not like regression. It was weird, but he's doing well this season. He's averaging 6 assists per game as listed here. I think he's averaging right around 20 points per game as well. So he's having himself
That's
quite
good
a good
then.
season.
Yeah.
Obviously we know who the better point guard is, and Mike Conley is someone who I actually was encouraging the Knicks to potentially trade for in the offseason. But that seems so insignificant now. I was thinking about, trying to move Randall or something like that and making that work out, with the salaries. But
Hmm.
obviously, now that Randall's playing at literally a most improved player level, there's no reason at all to move him. Having a tough time for whatever reason. Preview. Yeah, usually on ESPN I'm able to see the individual matchups, but for whatever reason I'm having a tough time. Let me just go to this, and then we'll look at the past game. The last game we played against the Jazz was this season, correct? It was this season.
Hmm. Yep.
Um,
January 6th. It's
January
the
6th. So it was
Rivers
not
game in the fourth quarter.
right. Rivers popped off in the fourth quarter. I remember that game.
Yep.
Mike Conley had probably one of his not worst. I don't know what his season individual games have been like, but probably one of his worst games of the season, which is a great sign. It shows that maybe Peyton will be able to clamp him up tonight, or at least that's what I'm hoping for. But I know
Hmm.
Mitchell had a really tough night when it came to finishing at the rim in the fourth quarter. Remember, he's missing all those shots.
Hmm.
Obviously, 8 for 23 is nothing to go brag about, but you know how players in this sort of NBA environment are. I think guys like Donovan Mitchell, they're killers. They'll come out, they'll give you 40 if they feel like it, and I'm hoping that him having a bad game that game, doesn't ignite him to come and kick our butts this time. Isn't
Hmm.
anything I'll worry about. But obviously, individual matchups. I know, Zach, you said you didn't know much about Mike Conley, but I think we can both agree that Mike Conley is better than Alfred Payton in a lot
Of
of
course.
respects, obviously.
That is very true.
But we got guys like Bogdanovich, and I'm not sure who's exactly going to be in the lineup. I feel like it's interchangeable with this Jazz team because they do have Joe Ingles. They have Jordan Clarkson. I know Jordan Clarkson's majority time the sixth man, but Joe Ingles could very easily start if Bogdanovich is having a cold streak. I'm not sure how he's been doing lately. But if you want to talk about kind of the center matchup, that again will be really interesting.
Yeah.
The Mitch Robinson, Rudy Gobert thing, they have very similar play styles. So I think
Yeah.
it's going to be really interesting watching those two go at it. It'll be fun to watch. I'm just hoping Mitch doesn't go into foul trouble early because that's usually the trouble with the elite centers like that. So yeah, I mean, Zach, if you want to talk a little bit about the R.J. Barrett Donovan Mitchell matchup, which is also going to be a lot of fun to watch, I'll let you have the floor
Yeah.
there.
That'll be very entertaining to watch. Well, RJ's been pretty hot lately. He didn't have a great game versus the Trailblazers, but before that, he's been shooting very efficiently.
Right.
Can't complain about that. So hopefully we get to see him stay hot from three somehow. We'll see how that goes, but we know with Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell, like you said, he could put up 40, put up 20. He's averaging 24, so
Right.
it's going to be difficult to contain him. I think he's just one of those guys where if you pay to watch him, you know what he's going to do. He's going to put up his usual numbers. So hopefully RJ could do his best to contain it, but can't get mad at him because it's Donovan Mitchell at the end of the day.
Right. I
whatever he
mean,
does.
the last game that RJ played, and I know he was in quite the cold streak at that point, but 4 for 14 is nothing to brag about in that sort of game, especially over 3 from 3. But obviously, like you mentioned, he's on quite the hot streak, despite. And he only took 9 shots last game, so I'm really not giving him a hard time for not getting his offense going. But quickly, had that amazing game, and obviously we
Yeah.
weren't able to cover the post game of that because it was such a late game. But if we have quickly maybe play on Conley tonight, that also may be an interesting matchup. Considering Mike Conley's defense, has been lackluster in his later years, although it's still just, it's pretty good, but it's not nearly as good as when Mike Conley was in his prime. So maybe we'll see quickly pop off again tonight. Who knows? Because obviously the point guard depth with this Jazz team really doesn't go that deep. If you look, I mean, their second guard is Joe Ingles, Jordan Clarkson, which is they're quality guys, but their offense, right? We're not talking about a lot of defense on this Jazz team, despite having Rudy Gobert, obviously. Royce O'Neal, Zach, I don't know much about him. He kind of goes under the radar, but he is a low-key, decent player in this league. And I know he ran actually a little bit of point guard for them last year, although he is listed as a power forward, so it's a little bit interesting. But
he's a 6'4" power forward.
That's
crazy.
He's more of like a point forward, Julius Randle type of vibe, but he provides less offense, and I believe he is a defensive player, considering the stats he puts up on a regular basis and the amount of minutes he's given. So it's definitely something to watch out for. Royce O'Neal could be one of those quiet guys who has a good game against us, Something you got to worry about. So hopefully their defensive scheme is mainly focused around that lob threat of Rudy Gobert, because I remember in our last post-game / pregame, I remember I in particular talked about the pick and roll with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, or Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert. It's very interchangeable. But what they try and do is, obviously Rudy Gobert being the elite rim protector and an offensive player on the glass that he is, sets a pick, rolls, dunks over people. It's that simple. And that's how Mitch is going to pick up a lot of his fouls in this game, if at all. So I'm just kind of worried about that in particular. I don't know about you, Zach. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's always a threat with a center like Rudy Gobert, but we'll see. Hopefully he learns from last game, but we'll see.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to tell before games, but we'll see.
I do definitely have high hopes for the Knicks against this Jazz team, considering we've beat them before. Although it is a tough matchup. At the end of the day, if we can lock up guys like Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, I do believe we have this win. If you put the ball in Mike Conley's hands, I'm not 100% confident that he's going to be able to destroy us like someone like Donovan Mitchell would be able to, especially with Elfrid Payton playing up on him, who, by the way, although he may not be a great offensive player, and he's proven me wrong in some ways more than others this season. He can't really shoot threes. He's terrible at that, but he's an okay driver to the basket. He has proven to be a serviceable defender in the league, and I think that's something that we're going to talk about later with Lonzo Ball and Derrick Rose and the trade and vice versa. We'll talk about all that stuff, but him being on our roster, being the defender at the point guard spot, isn't actually a bad choice, and that makes me understand why Thibodeau has him starting over Quickly. Because I feel like we can agree that Quickly, although he may be quite the offensive threat from the three-point line, which is necessary, he's not the best defender in the world, okay? He's somewhere in between 6'2 and 6'3. I'm not confident he's much taller than that, although he may be listed as. But I don't think Quickly's really that tall, and that's going to hurt him defensively, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Game basketball is game height. So he's listed as 6'3", but I agree. I think he's like 6'2".
Yeah, he's somewhere close in that range. Now, what I will mention is that we do have some players that are out tonight, or at least day-to-day, that is. Now, Frank Ntilikina is listed as day-to-day, but I do believe that he is just going to be a do-not-play decision tonight by Thibodeau, which is also something we really have to talk about. Very serious discussion about Frank. Reggie Bullock apparently is listed as day-to-day, which will hurt our roster depth a little bit, but it gives guys like potentially Kevin Knox a chance to start. Alec Burks will probably fit in that spot, but Kevin Knox will get some good minutes off the bench. But Austin Rivers is also listed as day-to-day as of yesterday, and I'm not sure if he is or isn't playing tonight, but I think he's playing tonight. I'm not 100% sure about that. Obviously, they have guys also like Derek Favors that are listed as day-to-day. I'm not sure if he's playing. I'm not a Jazz fan. But the less depth that the Jazz have, the better for us, right? So regardless
Yeah.
whether or not he's playing. That may change the game big time. He's a big guy coming in off the bench. I feel like him and Nerlens would match up just fine. So I'm not super worried about that. But at the end of the day, Derek Favors is a good offensive player. He's also a defensive stud when he wants to be. So I'm hoping he's out tonight. So I think now that we've kind of gotten started about Frank a little bit here, Zach, do you want to mention, because I can talk about it too, but I got this article pulled up. The Knicks don't have a role for Frank Ntilikina. Do you have anything to say about that? Or
I think it makes sense. I know our very first podcast, we talked about all this point guard depth with Quickly. We didn't know how much minutes Quickly would get, but now we see Quickly. We're like, oh, yeah, this guy's already NBA ready. We didn't know that. I felt like we thought he really wasn't going to get that many minutes. I thought he was going to be like a Alonzo Trier minute guy where like he starts a little bit and then just no minutes. But I think he's solidified his role in this rotation. So in comes Quickly. Frank Ntilikina really hasn't proved much as like a guy that should be in the rotation every single night. He gets hurt all the time. So I think it makes sense why he slipped out of the rotation. It's kind of sad to see like a top 10 pick, another top 10 pick that just isn't working out. But yeah, I just lost his role. He just wasn't NBA ready.
Yeah, I couldn't help but agree with you. It's unfortunate at the same time that Frank is not getting minutes anymore. It does make sense, though. In theory, I thought at the beginning of the season that Tom Thibodeau, being a defensive-oriented coach, would just love Frank. But obviously, with all the injuries, he's had plenty of his, quad injuries. I know he's had a lot of Achilles injuries, minor ones, that is. But, those lower leg injuries and those minor little finger injuries, that stuff like that, it adds up, right? You're missing a lot of time, you're not going to be consistent in practice, and you're not going to get minutes. It's just that simple, and it's really unfortunate. I agree with you, Zach, that for one, he didn't pan out, and he's getting kicked out of the rotation by a rookie. That says something about his progression over the last few years, that it's been a little too slow.
Exactly.
I mean, how much longer do we want to give Frank? I mean, what has it been, 4 years now, right?
Yeah.
There's really not that much time left for you, Frank, and a month or two from now, you may be on the New Orleans Pelicans, you might be on the Detroit Pistons. It could be one of the two. You never know. But I have high hopes for Frank on other teams. I just don't think he'll fit in the system anymore, and I don't think this relationship is fixable with him, just because of all the injuries he's gotten over the past few years, and I don't see him sliding back in the rotation. And I will mention one more thing, is that Tom Thibodeau he doesn't hate Frank's game. It's Frank's kind of fault in a way, if you want to call it that. With all the injuries, he missed the last 13. So that's some more context for you. That just how many games we played this season? What's our record? So our record's 8-10. So we're going into our 19th game of the year. The dude's missed 13 games.
Exactly.
And that's with injury. And that's not excluding, or that's excluding the do not play decisions from Thibodeau. So it's something that Frank really needs to get back in the groove. We're seeing DSJ exceed and get more minutes than this guy. And DSJ was arguably the worst player in the league last year. So what does that make Frank at this point? Unfortunately, a guy who may not have much potential left. But aside from that, I feel like it's appropriate now to move on. Let's talk trade rumors, right? The Knicks have been in talks, right? So let's talk trade rumors. The Knicks have been in talks with the New Orleans Pelicans and the Detroit Pistons, as far as I'm concerned. For guys like Derek Rose, for guys like Lonzo Ball. It's definitely been interesting, I'd say. I honestly did not expect Derek Rose to be on our radar, but I did expect Lonzo Ball to be on our radar. So how about we talk about Lonzo Ball first, right? According to Scoop B, who's an NBA insider, he's like an agent. Lonzo Ball has interest from teams like the Bulls, the Clippers, the Knicks, Magic, Raptors, Raptors, and Mavericks. So that's quite a lengthy list of teams. Eliminating a few right away, I'd say the Magic, the Clippers, and the Bulls, I don't think are going to make aggressive moves for him as the Knicks, Raptors, and Mavericks may. And I'd even maybe push the Raptors out of that conversation. Just considering they have guys like Kyle Lowry, and are you really willing to rebuild this early? Who knows? So you
Hmm.
got guys like like the Mavericks and Knicks, who I think are serious contenders to maybe trade for him. I feel like the Mavericks would be they'd be giving up some assets for him. They want that kind of big three of Lonzo, Luca, and Porzingis. I could see that definitely happening, but I could also see the Knicks not giving a Godfather offer for him because it is just Lonzo Ball at the end of the day. But I could see the Knicks throwing a serviceable offer at the Pelicans, one that they might not refuse, depending on the packages they get. But I'm sorry, I have to mention one more team, Zach. I didn't.
Hmm.
I left this out just strictly because of the tweet, but I know that the Warriors were also in some legitimate talks about a Kelly Oubre deal. I
Yeah.
know they were looking for JJ Redick, so that's also something that could be a threat to the Knicks and getting Lonzo Ball. But aside from that sort of conversation with the Warriors, I'd say that probably the Knicks have the second best chance, if not the first best chance to get them, just depending on the trade we throw at them. So obviously, I put together a little trade here, me and Zach together, and I'd say it's appropriate that we give up like someone like Kevin Knox, Austin Rivers, who I do want to keep, but at the same time, he's a guy who's pretty much in his prime at this point. He's a legitimate guy. He's on a great contract, someone the Pelicans would like to have, I'm sure, especially in a West playoff team situation. And Frank Ntilikina, who obviously has not really had a great time on this Knicks team. He's not really getting any more opportunities. You also throw in that unprotected Dallas first, which I think is kind of the trade bait in that trade, because that could potentially be a lottery pick. As much as maybe you could say that the Mavericks will slide into playoffs, this and that. They're 8-9 right now. I watched the game against the Nuggets last night. They look kind of sloppy. I don't know if that team's going to make it to the playoffs. So we're talking about a potential top anywhere between 10 and 14 pick right there, with Kevin Knox, Frank, and Austin for Lonzo. And worst case scenario, it's 15 through 20 because they're not going to be a 1 seed. They're not going to be a 2 seed, right? So it's going to be quite the, I'd say, interesting situation. Do you take Kelly Oubre and potentially trade bait as in like a first, or do you just take guys like Kevin Knox, who you're gonna have to bank on, you're gonna have to take a gamble on, and this first round pick that you also have to take a gamble on? What do you think, Zach?
I think this is a great trade. I think this helps like fix that messy point guard kind of situation. So I feel like we really cleaned that up, making it Lonzo, then quickly bring in
Yeah.
those young guys. Obviously, Lonzo, hopefully he's got a good amount more developing. He needs it. So I feel like that would be great to complement right in front of quickly for now.
Mhm.
And we obviously, Frank's just not working out. Rivers, once we signed him, we said he was great trade bait.
Right.
This would be a perfect trade to do it. And that Mavs pick, when you were saying from 10 to 14, I don't think we're going to get anybody better than Lonzo Ball or in that area. So I feel like just flip it. I feel like the Clippers don't really have any picks with the Paul George trade. So, like you were saying, with the Clippers not really being an option to trade, just more reason why we are just a better suitor and we can provide more. And just Hernan Gomez at the end just to clear cat. So I feel like it's a great trade. Hopefully, I don't know what team can really offer more than that. We're flying a lot of young assets when we're not that good yet. So, yeah, I don't really think there's really a much better trade that any team really is going to offer.
No,
We'll see.
I
Oh, and of
completely
course, Kevin
agree.
Knox.
Obviously with
Yeah.
Kevin Knox. We're taking a gamble on trading Kevin Knox because we have seen flashes from him this season of a consistent player. That is, if he was able to get consistent minutes. Maybe before you trade Kevin Knox, you start him for a few games. You see what he can do. Maybe you'd increase his trade value as well. I think there's
Hmm.
definitely a lot of scenarios that the Knicks could pull off in this sort of trade. But I think that this is a great offer, especially for a guy in Lonzo Ball that will be a restricted free agent. So he could definitely just accept his qualifying offer, which is, I believe, around 10 million or something like that. Maybe 10, 11 million. Not exactly sure. But if he just accepts his qualifying offer, we get him for max a year and a half. So that's going to be a situation where we're kind of also taking a gamble here. Is Lonzo going to come back? He's got. I think maybe it's a team option. I think it's a player option though, $14.3 million in the which is the qualifying offer in 21-22 free agency. But I'm sure he'd like to go for more of a long term deal. So the Knicks have to have complete confidence that this guy Lonzo is going to sign back with them if we're going to give up, I'd say, two good young assets with that pick and a very, very valuable contract in Austin Rivers that could even land us a first round pick at the deadline if we play our cards right. But obviously, just for more of like a player filler, we'd also taken Hernan Gomez, who's really just an insignificant part of the trade. You could interchange him with anybody on that roster making under $1 million a year and it would work. But I think that they'll probably ask for a guy like Quickly. I would be very surprised if the Knicks decided they wanted to give up that much for a guy like Lonzo. And I know that's, maybe it sounds a little dramatic that I'm saying, yeah, we're giving up too much for Lonzo if it's just Quickly, but the kid has a lot of potential. He's young. He's younger than Lonzo. And so far, me and Zach talked about it a little bit earlier, he's already got a higher career high than Lonzo does. I mean, do you really expect us in his first 15 games of his entire NBA career to just trade him away that easily? No, we're not going to do that. If anything, we're asking for more if you want Quickly. It's that simple.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that that's a serviceable trade. I think that's something we can pull off. And I like it. I like the idea of getting Lonzo on this team. I think he fits perfectly under Thibodeau. And he's just a guy who I believe would be a great defender on this team, obviously, like I said, under Thibodeau. And he can get his offense going. I know his splits haven't been great this year, somewhere around 43% from the field, which is kind of ugly. But at the end of last season, I did mention to Zach, he had a lot of bursts of potential. He was getting triple-doubles, left, right, and center. He was scoring 20-plus a game. And if we can bring him back to that version of Lonzo Ball, we got a really nice complementary piece around guys like R.J. Barrett and Obi Toppin, who are both, honestly, Mitchell Robinson and Obi Toppin, who are both lob threats, right? So that's going to be just a beautiful-looking team if we get Lonzo on it. And I think that there's definitely a lot of work to do. So if we can make this trade, I think that's the move in the right direction.
Yep.
Moving on a little bit more to Derrick Rose, who I'm not as intrigued in, but I am interested. Derrick Rose, I could see us giving up a little bit for him as well. Obviously, our payroll would be kind of similar to the Lonzo deal if we traded for Derrick Rose, and that doesn't matter as much. But I could see us giving up Dennis Smith Jr. and a second-round pick from Charlotte. I think the idea with Detroit is they just want to bring in young assets. And we have a lot of young assets, don't get me wrong. And it's hard to give up guys like that. But at the same time, Dennis Smith Jr. not really working out. Maybe give him a second opportunity in Detroit, playing next to Blake Griffin, Sekou Doumbouya, Sadiq Bey, right? So give him a chance in Detroit. Maybe they take a chance on him. Maybe they want Frank instead. It's honestly interchangeable, like I said.
Yeah.
But that Charlotte second-round pick, that could really seal the deal. Obviously you want future assets as well, and maybe they want to trade up in this draft, so maybe you get the second-round pick from us. It's somewhere from the 30 to 45 range, and boom, you trade up in the draft for maybe another first-round pick or something like that. Who knows? And obviously it's for an expiring contract in Derrick Rose, who I think will move on next season to a different team. I think even if we have Derrick Rose for half a season, it's kind of a win in a way. The mentorship is going to be a nice aspect. Obviously, guys have guys like Quickly. You have guys like R.J. Barrett. They're two guards that kind of need a mentorship type thing. Elfrid Payton, sure, you can consider him a veteran, but he's still young, okay? As much as he doesn't really have much more to grow, his potential has kind of reached where it's at. He's not really going to teach much. Derrick Rose, I believe, is going to be a good teacher, kind of like a DeAndre Jordan when he came in and taught Mitchell Robinson a few things. I think that Derrick Rose could be that to the Knicks. And I also think that we may be able to lock him up on a decent deal if the money's right. So I think that trade could also be definitely a serviceable trade, and I'm totally cool with it. How do you feel about this, Zach?
Gonna be totally honest. I don't like it. I think it's really dumb. I think the trade that you have made, it's a great trade. I think that we don't use Dennis Smith. Might as well trade him. Second round pick, sure. But when you think about it, what are you going to do with the point guards? Now you're just clogging point guards. You have Payne, you have Quickly, you have Rivers still, and now you're going to throw Rose in there. So you're screwing with minutes. I feel like who's going to be the odd man out? I would say Payne, but he's starting. He has like 25, 30 minutes a night. So it just doesn't really make sense. And I feel like we're still far from a serious contend. Well, we're obviously not serious contending, but maybe playoff contending this year if they keep it up. I don't know. If they're just going to let him go, I don't see the point. Maybe
Right.
you just completely cut Payne's minutes, but he hasn't been playing that bad. So,
True.
and the chemistry's great right now. I don't know why you mess with it and clog another point guard in there. I truly just don't see the point.
Now here's the
That's my
thing.
full opinion.
I figured you'd say that, and I didn't know which way you'd go. And
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you in a lot of ways with the minutes. And Tom Thibodeau obviously would have to have a very strict rotation where he'd cut out quality players' minutes.
Yeah.
And I think that would be tough. I definitely think Elfrid Payton's a guy that at the trade deadline we could just cut from the roster. I think he could get picked up by another team, but at the same time, if we're trading someone to the Pistons, I'm not sure if they would even care to pick up Elfrid Payton. I feel like they'd rather just take in Dennis Smith Jr. and not the additional salary. So that's the reason I didn't throw Elfrid Payton in that deal. But I don't think Elfrid Payton is a long-term guy for this team. I don't even think he's a short-term guy for this team. I think he probably has until the trade deadline to prove that he can shoot the ball, or he may be gone. His minutes may be cut with Quickly coming in, playing good off the bench. Um, and I did just add a tiny change to the trade. I saw this on Twitter, and I thought it was interesting. Derek Rose for potentially a guy like Frank Ntilikina, like I mentioned, interchangeable. And Ignas Brazdeikis, too, who I do like. But at the same time, as much as people sleep on this man, he does have potential if you give him a chance. And Detroit is a perfect place to give him a chance. They are just absolutely awful. Okay? They have absolutely nothing to lose by giving a guy like that a chance, and they still get their Charlotte second round pick. Now, I know that doesn't clear up what you were saying about the minutes, and I agree in that stance, but I feel like Elfrid Payton would just have to be the odd man out. You cut him. Austin Rivers is a shooting guard instead of a point guard, so I could see him starting in those minutes. And obviously, quickly, he's interchangeable. He could be point guard or shooting guard. He played shooting guard in college. He played point guard in high school. But it just, he more of a pure shooter in that instance. So he can kind of move anywhere. I think Tibbs will figure out what to do with the minutes. I just think Payton is going to be the odd man out in any scenario possible, even if we don't make a trade for Derrick Rose. I'm not sure if Payton will be a long-term or short-term guy for this team. What do you have to say about that, Zach?
My question is, do you think they're going to cut Payne whether or not they make this trade?
I think that there's a good chance we do cut Payton. I'm not sure if we'll
See,
cut him more than just let him sit on the bench, but Enes Kanter a few years ago had a similar situation where he just didn't fit in the rotation anymore. We had guys like Mitch coming in. Obviously, Porzingis was hurt, but Ennis just wasn't getting his minutes. And so, unfortunately, we had to just cut him from the team, although he was a quality player. So we've seen quality players been cut from teams multiple times, and it has nothing to do with their salaries. It has nothing to really to do with their play sometimes even. It just has to do with their fit. And Frank Ntilikina, I feel like, will be traded regardless. I think we may be able to get, at best, a second round pick for him. It just depends what team is interested. Obviously, he kind of brings that Kendrick Nunn type of potential, but he has to stay. Or I'm sorry, not Kendrick Nunn. Chris Dunn. That's so far off. I don't know what I was thinking. But Chris Dunn, being that point guard defender type of guy, I think that's what Frank is going to be in the long term if he stays in the league. But if he can't find minutes on the Knicks and we can't trade him, Frank Ntilikina's time may be running out in the NBA, unfortunately. He may have to go back to France or something like that, or overseas and play there, prove himself. But, his time, unfortunately, is running out in the NBA, and if he doesn't pick it up, there's going to be a serious discussion about his future with this team, unfortunately, as much as I love the guy.
yeah. Yeah, I don't
Um,
know how realistic. I don't know if they'll cut Payne, especially because you brought up the Enes Kanter thing. They're on like 11-game losing streak, worst team in the NBA that year. So
right.
they were just trying to tank at that point. But they're like 500 right now, and he's a starting point guard. I don't know how realistic it is to just think they're just going to cut him. Be like, yeah, you're just a starting point guard in a 500 team. Like, I get the future thing, but they're playing well right now. I expect him to be gone after 1 year. Like, he's just a serviceable guy, and then they just, whoever starts over him, like a young guy. But, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how realistic it is to cut him. But if they get Derrick Rose, yeah, that makes sense. But if they
Right.
don't, I just don't see it.
Right. Because at the end of the day, always these are just rumors. There definitely could be a situation where we just see guys like Derrick Rose move on to the Clippers, and we see Lonzo go to the Warriors. And then we're the odd team out where we don't really have
Yeah.
any trades to make. Maybe we trade for a second or a first like we did last year. And we just kind of get in the same position in this offseason as we were the last offseason, which honestly is fine as long as we're developing our talent right and we're making the right draft decisions. But at the same time, you also kind of want to not speed up the rebuild in a way, but advance the rebuild. There's a big difference. If you get a guy like Lonzo on the team, you're advancing the rebuild. You're not speeding it
Exactly.
up, you're helping it, right? If you get a guy like Derrick Rose, you're helping it just as much because you're getting the fair mentorship, and you could potentially sign him on a cheap deal for the final years of his career almost. And at the same time, Derrick Rose is still a very serviceable point guard in the NBA, better than Dayton, in my opinion. Well, I don't even think that's opinion. I think that's fact in a way. I mean, he's developed this three ball. He's played under Thibodeau before, so there's a familiarity there. And I think that both those guys are great fits, and I think the Knicks are doing a good job by reaching out at least to some of these teams and seeing what is and is not available. Unless you have anything to add, Zach, we can give our predictions for the upcoming Jazz-Knicks game.
Yep.
Would you like to go first, despite talking a lot about trades here?
Yeah, I got it first. I'd go with 120 to 105.
120.
I think it'll be a close
favorite?
game, like our last game with the Jazz, but I think they'll pull it off. The Jazz will pull it off.
Now, I don't want to be unoriginal, but I would have to just agree with you on that front.
Yeah.
I think the Jazz are a very high-scoring team. Now, the one thing I would change is the score, and I know I agree with the win. I agree with the margin. I just think it'll be closer to a 105 to a 90 type of game. The Knicks, obviously, their offense hasn't been too hot as of lately. RJ Barrett's been getting the clamps put on him, especially as of last game. I mean, just as of last game has been getting the clamps put on him. But other than that, we haven't really been able to get our offense going, despite quickly having that nice 31-point game. We still only scored how many points in that game? Well, it was a higher scoring game, but it wasn't a great game because our defense wasn't good enough on Lillard.
113, 116.
So yeah, we scored 113, but at the end of the day, a lot of teams are averaging 113. That's like one of our highest scoring games of the season. And I also have to mention that playing teams like Portland and Utah, I think Utah's probably averaging around 115 points per game if I look at this. I'm not sure if I'll exactly see it. I'll probably have to look at the preview. I'm not sure, but I think the Jazz are averaging, they're averaging 113.2 points per game, whereas we're averaging 102 points per game. So obviously the margin there is a little different. But the Knicks are holding teams to right around 100 points a game, despite letting Portland beat them that one game where Dame just went off. I mean, he was unstoppable. And that you can't even really blame that on the Knicks as much as you can blame that as on Damian Lillard. But you know what? I could confidently say that I think we have a chance, considering we beat them once. But I have to agree with you in the fact that we're probably going to lose tonight. I just think we're going to hold them under 105. That's my prediction.
Okay.
And if you're comfortable now, Zach, forever hold your peace if you don't have anything else to say. But I think this stream is ready to end. We're about 20-25 minutes out from the Knicks game. If you're still watching, drop a comment, with the last minute in our stream. Interested in hearing your opinions so we can elaborate on them. But, we got a game to watch here, man. I'm getting excited.
9 o'clock.
Exactly, 9 o'clock. It's a little earlier than the last game. And who are we playing next? Just out of curiosity. I'm not very familiar with this schedule.
Let me check. Are we still on the West Coast? Knicks
There's a chance we are.
schedule. We got the Cats. We're home. Playing Friday.
Look at that. Back home on Friday. There's probably going to be a postgame on Friday, at least from me, I'm sure. Because we're going to be home, 7:30 game, probably around a 10:30 live stream. Not going to guarantee anything, but that's the hopes. I hope you all have a nice night. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see y'all later.
All right. Peace.
Peace.